Welcome, UCL fans, to the unofficial review and ranking for the United Championship League Week 8. Now, I've crunched the numbers and I've come up with, I believe, to be a fair and accurate ranking system for the UCL. Now, of course, none of this is affiliated with the United Championship League or any of its coaches. These are just what I have done the numbers on. Of course, I always encourage if any of the coaches are watching to leave a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section below if you disagree with the rankings at all as well. Now, before I get into the actual rankings, I'm just going to go ahead and review all 8 matches that took place this week. So, starting off, we have the St. Louis Rampardos, whose record is 6-1, taking on the South Beach Slow Kings, who have a record of 0-7. And we had a 3-0 victory for the St. Louis Rampardos. The MVP for St. Louis will go to Crobat and Mega Metagross, who both had 2 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Pittsburgh Pichus, who have a record of 3-4, taking on the Durham Dorudagons, who had a record of 5-2. And in a 2-0 victory, went to the Pittsburgh Pichus. The MVP for Pittsburgh goes to Entei, who had 3 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Toronto Tokakis, whose record is 2-5, taking on the Manchester Magnazones, whose record is 0-7. And it was a 3-0 victory for the Toronto Tokakis. The MVP for Toronto went to Jirachi, who managed to get 2 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Newcastle Nido Kings, whose record is 5-2, taking on the Tulsa Talonflames, whose record is also 5-2. And it was a clean 5-0 victory for the Newcastle Nido Kings. The MVP for Newcastle goes to Staraptor, who had 4 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Carolina Keldios taking on the Long Island Regirockies. The Carolina Keldios have a record of 3-4, while the Long Island Regirockies have a record of it was 4-3, and it was a 1-0 victory for the Carolina Keldios. The MVP for Carolina goes to Victini, who had 3 knockouts this week. Up next, we had the New York Yankees, whose record was 4-3, taking on the Philadelphia Feraligators, whose record was also 4-3. And it was a 4-0 victory for the New York Yankees. MVP for New York goes to Jolteon, who got 3 knockouts this week. Up next, we have the Bristol City Blazekins, whose record is 2-5, taking on the taking on the Grand Canyon Greninjas, whose record is 1-6. Sorry for the stumbling there. I just had miscalculations on things. It was a 2-0 victory for the Bristol City Blazekins. MVP for Bristol City will go to Dragonite, who managed to get 3 knockouts this week. Finally, probably one of the most anticipated matches this week, we had the Tucson Terrakions taking on the Bronx Bearticks. Both teams have a 6-1 record going into this. And it was a stunning 2-1 victory for the Tucson Terrakions. The MVP for Tucson went to Lucario, who managed to get 2 knockouts to win the game. So that will go ahead and wraps up the review section of this past week. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the rankings. Now again, my rankings might be a little bit different than others. I do take in the records into account, but I also take in the number of knockouts that each team has had over the course of the season. Of course, each team gets awarded 1 point if they knock out a Pokemon. If any Pokemon faints due to either Life Orb damage, recoil, or self-destruct in any way, they do not earn a point, and of course every team loses a point every time one of their Pokemons is knocked out. So we're going to go ahead and start off at number 16 with the Manchester Magnazones, whose record now stands at 0-8 and score of -34, because again, they just lose points every time a Pokemon dies. At number 15, we have the South Beach Slow Kings, whose record is 0-8 and a score of -26. At number 14, we have the Grand Canyon Greninjas, whose record is 1-7, and the score of -16. At number 13, we have the Bristol City Blazekins, whose record is now 3-5, and a score of -8. At number 12, we have the Carolina Keldios, whose record is 4-4, but have a score of -7. At number 11, we have the Toronto Tokakis, whose record is 3-5, and a score of -5. Up next, at number 10, we have the Long Island Regirockies, whose record is 4-4, and they have a score of -1. At number 9, we have the Philadelphia Feraligators, whose record is 4-4 now, and have a score of 0. Up next, at number 8, we have the Pittsburgh Pichus, who also have a 4-4 record, and have a score of +4. At number 7, we have the Tulsa Talonflames with a record of 5-3 and a score of 4. At number 6, we have the New York Yankees, who have a record of 5-3 and a score of 8. At number 5, we have the Durham Druttiguns, who have a record of 5-3 and a score of 9. Now, the next 4 spots will probably be controversial, and of course, it has no affecting on rankings on the actual UCL, which I will bring up here in a moment. But at number 4, I have the Bronx Bearticks, whose record is 9-2 and have a score of 9. At number 3, we have the Tucson Terrakions, who have a record of 7-1, but a score of plus 12. At number 2, and this is where the controversy will probably hit, I have the Newcastle Nido Kings with a record of 6-2, but a score of 14. And then finally, the St. Louis Rampardos with a record of 7-1 and a score of 19. Now, again, these are all just how I put it by the numbers alone. Record does go into account for some of this, but I also go by how many Pokemon they knock out in a season. So I'm actually going to go ahead and bring up what the UCL posted on their Twitter earlier today for their current standings. As you can see, very similar to ours, where I have St. Louis at 1, but they have Tucson at number 1. But it could just be a tie. They could be going in a certain order. I don't know what it is. I just put St. Louis first because, of course, he's had more kills and less deaths this season compared to the Tucson Terrakions. So, like I said, the current score, St. Louis Rampardos have 19, whereas the Tucson Terrakions have a score of 12. Now, the Bronx Bearticks and the Newcastle Nido Kings, I would put Newcastle higher than 4th just due to the fact that he has had more knockouts. The Bronx Bearticks have done really well this season, but at the same time, he's used a lot of tactics where he's lost his own Pokemon due to either like Final Gambit on his Asselgor as well as Life Orb recoils that have taken out his own Pokemon as well. So he's lost more Mons than the Newcastle Nido Kings have. Now, in the next 3 spots that they have, again, very similar to mine, they put New York, Tulsa, and Durham, whereas in mine, I go Durham, New York, and then Tulsa. Again, just going by the amount of kills that each team has had versus the number of deaths that they had as well. So that, very similar to mine, just a small change, and I moved Durham up to 5th on it. After that, they have the Philadelphia Feraligators and the Pittsburgh Pichus and the Long Island Regirockies. Very similar to mine, I would just put Pittsburgh ahead of Philadelphia, just due to the fact that they've at least had high kills in the season with fewer deaths than both the Gators and the Regirockies. Now, the Carolina Keldeos I rank lower than that just because they've had a lot more deaths than they actually have had kills this season. Even though the record is 4-4, they have actually ended up losing more than the Toronto Togekiss. So I would end up putting Toronto ahead of the Keldeos. Now again, I'm just putting it by the numbers, especially for such a low ranking, but it will affect the outcome, I believe, overall. And then the final 4 rankings that they have there with the Bristol City Blazekins, Grand Canyon Greninjas, South Beach Slowkings, and Manchester Magnazones match exactly what I have on paper as well. So that just goes to show that they're going strictly based upon the current records. I'm going more on the actual scores. Now, I'll hopefully be doing this right after I end this video, going to be going into a more in-depth analysis of each of the teams on 4 separate videos, going from the lowest ranking to the highest ranking team, talking about which Pokemon they've brought the most, which ones have had the most kills so far in the season, even which ones have had the most deaths in it. So hopefully I'll get started on that right after I'm done making this video, and I will hopefully have those videos up over the course of the next several days. But until then, that is what I have for my rankings this week. I will be back, of course, next Tuesday with another review and rankings for Week 9. Let me know in the comment section below what teams you're rooting for this season. If you agree with my rankings, give it a thumbs up, or if you have your own rankings, just let me know down in the comments as well. But I will see you all next week with another review and rankings. Take care, and good night.